Japanese and Croissants by Queer in the Moonlight. After the truce between the Port Mafia and the detective agency was established, it wasn't an uncommon thing for the members of both organizations to show up at a building of the other side. Sometimes as part of a mission that was required having mixed teams, and sometimes just because they could. Despite their differences, they all tolerated each other surprisingly well. Much to Kunikida's distaste, Akutagawa kept kidnapping Atsushi through the window, right behind his desk, and taking him God knows where, the cafe downstairs. Not only did that get the boy out of his paperwork, but it was also dumped on his poor co-workers, with the addition of Dazai's part of the empty documents. But there wasn't really anything they could do about it, so instead, they were just happy they weren't trying to kill each other. Akutagawa was the most frequently appearing in ADA's headquarters member of the Port Mafia, although some people expected that to be Mr. Fancy Hat, as Kinji continued to call Chuuya. The redhead turned up less often, but when he did, it was usually work or Dazai related. Whenever Chuuya came, he and Dazai would argue endlessly about anything and everything. That way, the agency members have learned many interesting things about the executive, but there were still some things they didn't know. Kunikida cursed his luck as he observed the short executive from afar. He has been sent to do an investigation on some random group that could possibly grow into a threat to both organizations, with not one, but two executives. All the way to the warehouse they were supposed to search, both of them had been silent, and Kunikida didn't know if he was supposed to be glad or terrified, but he supposed it could have been worse. At least he has seen both Nakahara and Koyu before, and didn't have to take a mission with a completely foreign people. Considering the mission was requested by Mori, they got a surprisingly big amount of information as to what they were required to do. According to him, the warehouse held files about the organization, which was pretty hard to believe, as they had to take down only 5 guards who were laying in a heap next to the doorway, courtesy of Nakahara. He couldn't help but be glad that Dazai didn't come along. They would have done significantly less work, and without him, Nakahara was surprisingly a nice person, if he had to say from their interactions and the way he occasionally spoke to Koyu. The ground floor, unfortunately, revealed 0 information, except an empty yogurt cup. At least it was strawberry flavored, which thankfully showed that the residents had at least human decency. The cellar, however, was a bit more cooperative. Kunikida separated from the executives and started going through a box stuffed with papers. Mostly they were useless, but he knew he'd eventually find something else than bills from a nearby pizza restaurant, until there was a slight tapping on his shoulder. "Kunikida-san." The detective got out a very undignified yelp as he was torn out of his papers. He turned around, only to face a slightly confused Chuuya Nakahara, who was innocently standing there with his arm still outstretched. Around the place his shoulder could have been seconds earlier. "Oh, I apologize. I didn't mean to scare you." The executive straightened and lifted his arm slightly in mock surrender. Kunikida frowned. "You didn't scare me. It's all right." He coughed lightly. "Is there anything amiss?" Nakahara handed him a small book. "I found this in one of those drawers." He waved at the table across the room. "However, I have troubles reading the title, so I was wondering if you could help me out." He paused for a second, forcing out another word. "Please." It was obvious he wasn't happy about it. The cover of the book was red, dark red, the title written in a similar style as Kunikida's notebook. He flipped the notebook in his hands, then looked up to Nakahara. The executive seemed to understand the confusion and pointed to 2 kanji characters on the front side. "These 2. "Wait, you can't read it?" Kunikida asked suspiciously. After all, the man had been going through and signing their paperwork for some time. Nakahara didn't seem to catch up, though. "Well, no, that's why I asked." The detective just gaped. "Have you gone to school?" "Yes, but they didn't teach me kanji." "Excuse me, so an adult who's working in an office signing important documents, you can't read?" Kunikida was having a hard time understanding, while Chuuya was just becoming frustrated. "Of course I can fucking read, you know that, just forget it." He sighed and took the book from Kunikida's hands. "Ani-san?" He proceeded to call for the other executive. "Can you help me with something for a minute?" Koyu appeared, coming from where she was hiding and obviously going through some papers as well. Oh sure, what is it? Nakahara handed her the book, pointing at the kanji again, his every move carefully observed by Kunikida. Koyu looked thoughtful for a few moments, then seemed to remember. All right, this one? She tapped her finger on the cover. Means crimson. And the other one means crane. Yeah, I know that. You better. They teach those in first grade. Now, the combination isn't really known, so it can't be blamed on you running away from learning vocabulary. Although I believe you already know it in katanan. She handed him the book back. It means flamingo. That's some awfully complicated shit for a stupid bird, Nakahara muttered. Koyu patted his shoulder. Don't worry about it. Everyone just uses the katanan version. Japanese is weird. Yet, here you are. Kunikida was just becoming more and more confused. His gaze moved between the two executives. He was positive there was some major detail he was missing. I'm sorry, but what's going on? He asked, his voice cracking a bit. You see, Nakahara smirked. I'm not Japanese. Then, I'm European. I don't look like one, do I? Kunikida could swear he wore the same shit-eating grin Dazai did, if his brain wasn't too busy trying to make some sense out of the new information. So he just sat there, with mouth agape and eyes slightly dazed, while Koyu laughed in the background. I think we broke him. It was a particularly hot day somewhere in the middle of summer. The air in the agency was absolutely unbreathable. Inhaling it for more than a few hours would surely fry your insides. Everyone except Kunikida has long given up on trying to do the paperwork, and were just sprawled around their desks. The blonde detective was attempting to get back to his schedule but failing, his brain already half-cooked on the inside of his skull. So eventually, even he has given up, and proceeded to majestically fall off his chair, not even bothering to get up. Dazai didn't even sing a suicide song, nor pull off any pranks, which was a miracle, although a bit less appreciated than it would normally be. But considering it was also around noon, and Dazai's bandages didn't really have a cooling effect, it wasn't that surprising at all. And everything that would have eventually been fine, really. The only thing ruining that possibility was a meeting with the Port Mafia planned for that later afternoon, which luckily wasn't an important event since the only people coming were Chuuya, Akutagawa, and for some reason Higuchi. Mori didn't bother to come, which was understandable, but Akutagawa didn't think he'd ever forgive him for allowing Higuchi to come along, as if the incredibly high temperature wasn't a big enough bother. As for Chuuya, the redhead was positive he'd die that day and refused to come sober. Spoiler alert, he did. He never came to a job even slightly tipsy. Much to the distaste of everyone attending, the clock slowly but surely neared 4 o'clock, the time of the meeting. They dragged themselves to the room with their last projector. They kept disappearing for some reason. Coats forgotten and ties unfastened, everything be damned. As for the 3 agency members, Kunikida was still looking at the floor with longing expression, looking unhappy as he was aware he'll have to stand to present the topics. Atsushi managed to drop his tie somewhere right after he claimed to loosen it a little, and Dazai didn't even attempt to piss off Chuuya right after the Port Mafia arrived. Akutagawa was trying to shield himself with his ability from the sun, but failing miserably. He decided to express his despair by half laying on the table and half slipping from his chair. Higuchi was observing him from her seat, sweating. No one dared guess if it was from the heat or something else. Chuuya was sitting next to them, also only in a shirt, trying to remain in as little layers as possible, absent-mindedly fanning himself with his hat. His hair, they noticed, was tied into a tight bun, probably in an attempt to keep them from sticking to his neck. So, Kunikida started, already sounding tired. I'm glad everyone arrived safely and is ready to start the meeting. 45 minutes into the meeting, Atsushi had also given up on trying to stay awake. Everyone else was in various stages of falling asleep, not even pretending to hide it. Kunikida was talking to himself in his newfound will to stick back to his schedule, although he didn't seem to mind or notice that no one else was listening. The most awake person in the room was definitely Higuchi, who watched Akutagawa sleep the whole time. It was kind of creepy, but Atsushi didn't have the energy to tell her anything. This is terrible. Dazai sighed with his head against the wooden surface of the table. Kunikida-kun, could you stop talking, please? We're trying to sleep. We need to address the conditions further, but the president still hasn't given us approval, so we'll have to wait. Just shut the fuck up, asshole, Chuuya mumbled, slowly stretching his arm across the table to poke at Dazai. Let him have fun. The interaction somehow got stuck in Atsushi's brain, floating there for a few long seconds before the were-tiger realized something. There was something about the way Chuuya spoke that blended the words together so they were almost unrecognizable, yet it was still Japanese. Too tired, he decided he was probably having a heat stroke and almost let the thought go, before Dazai spoke again. Your words sound really funny, Chuubi, he laughed. Has my dog drank before coming here? Ah, so it wasn't a heat stroke. Or maybe he was actually asleep, and only dreaming about the whole scenario. Chuuya opened one eye and glared at his ex-partner. Unlike you, I don't drink before work. Besides, my words are fine. They sound really strange, Chuuya-san, Atsushi supplied, getting a raised eyebrow from the executive. Are you feeling okay? Of course. Dazai's mouth made the O shape. Is your accent slipping out, Chuuya? Excuse me, Dazai-san. Atsushi started, but immediately got interrupted. Well, at least he knew it was definitely a hallucination. Chuuya may have looked a bit foreign, but his Japanese was always perfect and there was never any accent that made his speech sound so bad. The man in question frowned. What are you on about? It is! Oh, that's so adorable. Wait, Atsushi-kun, get a camera, we need to record this. Unsure what to do, Atsushi hesitated. Dazai-san. His mentor flashed him a bright grin. Blackmail purposes! I think we should discuss the number of cats that have come to our doorstep every morning. The president is kind to offer those cats food, but this is really getting out of hand. Kunikida carried on in the background with his monologue, successfully ignoring the other occupants of the room. Atsushi seemed to be in a very bad luck that day, as the blonde detective chose to look up from his notes, the first time the whole meeting, precisely at the moment he grabbed the door handle on his way to get Dazai's desired camera. Atsushi, where do you think you're going? Atsushi honestly forgot the majority of the last meeting with the Port Mafia. He mostly blamed it on the incredible heat and the fact that he was still half asleep the whole time. But the part with Kunikida yelling at him for even attempting to leave the room was unforgettable. Dazai didn't even do his paperwork after that, but at that point, he didn't even expect him to do so. However, there was one part of the meeting that completely vanished from his memory, but that was about to resurface and keep him up during nights. It all started very harmlessly. He and Junichiro were just talking, and somehow they ended up stumbling over the word croissant, which was honestly the first sign to stop the conversation. I'm telling you, you're saying it wrong. I know how to handle my croissant. Atsushi crossed his arms, offended. You're just stupid. Junichiro frowned. It's obviously pronounced without the T, dumbass. What's next? Are you forcing me to say bread instead of bread? That's not how it works, Atsushi, Junichiro yelled. His knowledge about foreign languages wasn't very wide, but he was pretty sure about this. Yeah, how come? Junichiro's response was interrupted by the door creaking as someone walked in. What are you two doing? Yosano asked, looking slightly pissed off. I can hear you all the way from the infirmary. You're lucky Kunikida is out on a case with Dazai. He would have your heads otherwise. I'm sorry, Junichiro said. Atsushi just doesn't know how to pronounce croissant. Shut up! I already told you it's with the T. That's frickin' stupid. Has your Okagawa boyfriend told you this to make the agency go into war? What? Yosano sighed. Shut it, both of you. And it's pronounced croissant. You happy now? Junichiro made an angry noise in the background, and Atsushi was too busy sulking to be happy about it. The doctor just shook her head and was about to leave in peace. Yosano-kun. There was a new voice, which had her rolling her eyes in annoyance. Why are you telling the kids such nonsense? I thought better of you. Dazai made a disappointed face from the doorway. Oh yeah? Yosano rested her arms on her hips. Do you think you know better than me and my cleaver? Yes. Anyway, I thought that you, with how often you buy pastries for Rampo, would know that the T is silent. Are you implying I can't pronounce a fucking roll? There are kids here. Dazai. All right. He lifted his hands up in mock surrender. I'm just saying, it's croissant. Atsushi carefully interjected. Dazai-san. I would trust her on this. I think she visits a bakery more often than you. No offense. How could you say that, Atsushi? I'm wounded. He has a point, Yosano said. The only thing you eat is canned crab. That may be true, but at least I know the correct way to say croissant. It's croissant. Junichiro sighed. Can't we just ask Kunikida? If Dazai-san is here, he's back from the mission as well, right? No. Dazai grinned. I left him to deal with the police right after we were done. Dazai, what the fuck? Can't we just ask Rampo or the president? Atsushi looked at Yosano hopefully. Nope. She shook her head. Rampo's out with Kyoka, and the president is busy. And Kenji probably doesn't even know what a croissant is. Junichiro added. Croissant! Whatever. Dazai tapped his chin, seemingly deep in thought. I think I have the perfect solution for us, he announced cheerfully. I'll just call my French boyfriend. For a short moment, the room was silent. You could probably hear a pin drop, which was a miracle, considering Dazai was there. Then it erupted. What? Who in their right mind would date you? Dazai wore his usual shit-eating grin. I'm not gay, I'm bi, and I haven't said he's in his right mind. He says he just really likes wine, but I'm pretty sure he's an alcoholic at this point. Europeans must have very shitty taste in romantic partners, Yosano scoffed. The brunette just looked offended. Dazai-san, I don't want to be rude, but are you sure he really exists? Why do you have so little faith in me, Atsushi-kun? Dazai whined. This isn't fair. Just call him, Junichiro said, sounding very tired. It was honestly understandable. Who wouldn't be tired after dealing with Dazai? Dazai pulled his phone out of his pocket, dialing a number while his every motion was carefully observed by the group of detectives. The silence stretched, everyone waiting with breaths held, as the telltale sound of a dial ringtone ran through the room. Yosano reached out and switched to speaker, so everyone could hear more comfortably. Somewhere around the fifth ringtone, the phone shortly beeped, indicating that the mysterious boyfriend had declined the call. Dazai only pouted, while Junichiro sighed yet again. You sure he's still your boyfriend? He asked in exasperation. He doesn't seem very excited to talk to you. Yeah, I think so, Dazai replied, fiddling with the phone. Atsushi peeked over his shoulder shamelessly. Why don't you have his name on your contact then? Yosano frowned. That's true. Dazai, why is that? The brunette shot her with a bright grin. Well, maybe that's because there's a bunch of annoying co-workers getting in my life, Yosano-kun. His phone beeped again. Dazai glanced down to check the screen. He texted me back. Show us, asshole. The doctor grabbed after the phone, and the detective quickly dodged her, making her growl in frustration, but he showed them the screen anyway, and let them scroll down the conversation slowly. What the fuck do you want? I'm busy. Shouldn't you be working or something? Ew, don't say that word. You know I don't do that, slug. Osamu, the point? Alright, fine. My friends want to know how to say croissant. Who is the asshole trying to say it with a T? The T is fucking silent. Thanks, love you. Fuck off. Yosano smirked. Osamu? Shut up. Meanwhile, after rapidly scanning the chat, Atsushi's face fell, and he suddenly looked awkwardly at Junichiro, who seemed very much less tired, eyes visibly brighter. The were-tiger took slow steps backwards, away from the group. Yosano was muttering something into Dazai's ear, the said man drastically paling after he heard something what Atsushi assumed was closely associated with the chainsaw, or maybe the cleaver. One could never know. Junichiro was just content with his victory. Just as Atsushi was about to take one last step towards the door, his back collided with something else. He snapped up in surprise. After hearing a yelp from behind, he quickly identified the something as Kunikida. The blonde's papers were scattered on the floor. The room froze once again that day. Atsushi's eyes widened as he grasped his head and ran out of the room, screaming. Kunikida stared at everyone around him in disbelief. What the fuck? Poor Kunikida. Are you sure he really lives here? Yosano folded her arms on her chest, frowning slightly. It doesn't seem very, Dazai-ish, Atsushi supplied. Yeah. Kunikida just glared at the white, fancy-looking door in front of them. The three of them were currently standing on top of an equally fancy-looking apartment building before a door that was, according to Dazai's records, leading to his flat. They were there only to take some important papers to the man, which he forgot to sign, of course, nothing else. They definitely didn't want to know where he lived or anything. And, since Dazai had also mentioned having a boyfriend, there wasn't any other option. Not that Kunikida knew about that little detail. Atsushi peeked over Yosano's shoulder, reading the address once again. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it. Kunikida furrowed his eyebrows. It could be a prank. That's true, Yosano said, but I don't think he would go that far. It's written on his medical records, which may be updated and mostly empty, but it's Dazai we're talking about. Medical records, Kunikida. No one lies about these. Still. Well, Atsushi looked between the adults uncertainly. Maybe we could just ring the doorbell and see. I mean, we can always apologize and say we mistook the door or something. He's got a point. Kunikida? Fine, the blonde sighed. But don't blame me if this doesn't go as planned. With that, he pressed his finger on the bell after pressing the button for a few seconds and stepped back. Yosano and Atsushi exchanged an excited glance, which was more nervous from the weretiger's side. Then the door finally opened. They were faced with a slightly surprised Dazai, who was standing in front of both of them in a brown sweater and sweatpants. He eyed them suspiciously for a moment before he greeted them. Kunikida, Yosano, Atsushi, what can I do for you? Kunikida coughed. Oh, well, yes, hello, Dazai. We need you to fill out the rest of your medical records, so we thought we'd come here. He means that we noticed them only after you left. But it's kind of urgent, so we dropped by to see if you happen to have a few minutes to update them. Yosano cut off Kunikida impatiently, smiling brightly at the detective. Sure, you want to come in? Dazai asked, and opened the door wider in invitation. He reached in a closet and pulled out 3 pairs of fluffy slippers. The detectives quietly took off their shoes and just stared at each other for a few moments, while Dazai disappeared inside, cheerfully announcing, Chibi, we have visitors! There was some barely audible yelling coming in response. Atsushi's eyes were wide as he looked around, checking out the furniture of what was apparently a penthouse suite. Yosano muttered a quiet, whoa. Kunikida was silent. Dazai waved at them to come, so they obediently followed him, like a bunch of ducklings, through the hall and into a living room. And there, in all his glory, sat on the couch, huddled in an oversized hoodie, was Nakahara Chuuya, yelling at a TV. Oh my god, you're so fucking stupid! That could kill a child! In French. He's yelling in French. Both Yosano and Atsushi gaped. Dazai looked at them apologetically. He really loves cooking shows. You know, every time he gets a bit upset. Yeah, I can see, Yosano muttered, her eyes fixated on the short redhead. Dazai-san, Atsushi started slowly. Does this mean Nakahara-san is your boyfriend? I mean, he's in your house, and he's speaking French? He also really wanted to ask how come the executive was French in the first place and no one ever noticed, but stopped himself in time. Just in case he'd consider it rude, he told himself. But he was still curious. He is. Haven't I told you that before? The brunette smiled at them innocently. Oops, seems like I forgot. You know what? I'm not even surprised, Yosano sighed. It's not like I expected better from you. Behind the trio, Kunikida just stood silently, completely frozen. Atsushi waved his hand over his face. Kunikida-san. The man in question didn't respond. I think we broke him, announced Dazai calmly. as Kunikida fell backwards onto the perfectly polished parquets. His notebook fell out of his jacket with an impact, and the brunette bent down to pick it up when his arm got slapped away. "Fucking hell, Osamu, just let the guy be." Atsushi looked up and saw the redhead pushing Dazai away from Kunikida, while the latter was whining pitifully. "But Chuuya..." "Shut it, or you're sleeping outside today. You know it's going to rain." So mean. "And if you wanted to invite your friends over, you could have told me. I would have cooked more food." Atsushi coughed awkwardly. We're not gonna take long. We just brought Dazai-san his paperwork." "Oh, I see." Chuuya chuckled. "That bastard's not working again? I'm really glad I don't have to work with him anymore." "That's domestic violence, Chibi." Chuuya ignored the jab and carried on casually. "Also, maybe we should carry him." He pointed over to Kunikida. "On a couch or something?" No need for that." Yosano waved her hand. "Laying on couches that belong to Mafia is probably against his ideals." "Oh, okay then." "Unrelated question, but what show are you watching?" The executive smirked. "Kitchen Nightmares." Somehow, instead of filling out the paperwork, they ended up sitting in a very fancy living room, watching Kitchen Nightmares in French. Yosano looked like she didn't even need the subtitles they agreed to put on, which were ridiculously fast, and Atsushi's brain was starting to hurt from reading so quickly. And Dazai was reading his suicide book beside his boyfriend. They left Kunikida on the floor, completely forgetting about the poor detective. Chuuya, of course, started yelling again, in French, but this time, he was sometimes accompanied by Yosano in Japanese. "Was there anything today that I ate that wasn't microwaved?" Gordon Ramsay asked seriously on the screen, the French dub sounding almost unnatural considering everyone was used to his normal voice. "La salade." Yosano howled with laughter, tears running down her cheeks. Atsushi looked at her, confused. "What's wrong with microwaved salad? I do that all the time." His statement went unnoticed. Maybe it was for the better. "You fucking donut, of course you don't put fucking salad. I told you you're gonna murder someone. What the hell, I swear. Why would you even think of putting a fucking salad in the microwave?" Chuuya yelled, throwing his hands up. Dazai, absent-mindedly, patting his head, and Yosano snickered. Atsushi closed his eyes. Yep, they weren't gonna finish any work. Wow, it's not angsty. Isn't that crazy? Discord in the description.